Allie Robinson to Human Resources. Immediately. The disembodied announcement cracked over the warehouse speakers, slicing through the clang of loading docks like a blade I never saw coming. 5 minutes later, I was climbing the executive staircase, steel railing cold. Heart colder, toward a door I'd only entered to congratulate others. Inside. Everything smelled of lemon polish and endings. Sheila Marks, our immaculate HR director, waited behind a mahogany slab so wide it felt like a barrier. No handshake, no chair offered, just an envelope the color of faded rose petals, centered on the wood like a single wilted flower. Cost optimization, Sheila said, voice rehearsed. Her manicured finger nudged the envelope forward. The same way you push a bill toward a stranger who might not pay. I heard forklifts reversing 3 floors below. Their beeps suddenly foreign, like a language I used to speak but could no longer translate. I opened the envelope because my hands remembered how to move, even when my mind couldn't. Effective immediately. Role eliminated. Severance outlined in neat bullet points. The words were colder than the January wind that once froze half our fleet, an emergency I'd solved by sleeping beside diesel generators until they purred again. My gaze snagged on a ghost of ink beneath my name. Another employee's letters half erased with correction fluid. Edges still wet. Someone else had been destined for this pink slip before the ink switched targets. HR hadn't even waited for the brush to dry. Who was originally on this form? I asked, voice trembling between curiosity and disbelief. Sheila's smile flickered, then settled into corporate neutrality. Irrelevant. Allie. The decision is final. Security will escort you to collect personal items. Escort me? Like contraband leaving the premises? Behind her, a glass wall revealed 2 younger employees, barely out of college, touring the operations dashboard I'd architected from scratch. One pointed at the live metrics, eyes bright with novelty, ignorance disguised as confidence. I realized they weren't touring, they were inheriting. Somewhere in the hall, a janitor's radio crackled with the old Springsteen song we used to blast during peak season. The nostalgic chord slashed me deeper than Sheila's paperwork, reminding me that every square foot of this building still echoed with my voice and sweat. Blood thundered in my ears, yet everything else moved in slow motion. Sheila's lips forming platitudes. The tick of a designer clock. The soft hum of climate control shielding executives from the real warehouse air. 90 seconds earlier, I'd been indispensable. Now I was optional overhead. I slid the envelope into my coat pocket, straightened my back, and met Sheila's politely lethal stare. I didn't just lose my job. I was replaced. That's not the same thing. Back downstairs. The taste of lemon polish still on my tongue. I followed a security guard to what used to be my command center. The open office smelled of new paint, ambition, and something else, my sudden absence. Evan, slim and jittery, was already parked at my aeronautical chair, spinning it like a carnival ride. Tori, her earbuds dangling, traced Instagram loops on the touchscreen I'd begged purchasing to approve last year. A cardboard box sat on my desk, personal effects dumped inside as if they were leftover staplers. "You must be Mrs. Robinson," Evan chirped, as though greeting a visiting tour group. "HR said you'd stop by to tidy up." His words bounced off the steel rafters, bright and careless. I nodded, biting the inside of my cheek until the metallic tang steadied my voice. "I won't be long." While they compared filters for a launch day selfie, I slid a flash drive into the terminal to grab the last of my personal templates. Outlook opened automatically, flooding the screen with unread threads. One subject line, bolded and half hidden, caught my eye. Budget win. Habit overruled caution. I clicked. The email chain unfurled like a paper cut straight to the bone. From CEO Mark Havelock to Sheila, Ops Finance. And the board confirmed, Replacing Allie with 2 juniors saves us $3,100 a month. We just need warm bodies. Cheap ones. Warm bodies. Cheap ones. The words pulsed on the monitor. Each syllable a slap across 3 decades of crisis calls, graveyard shifts, and missed birthdays. That figure lit every sacrifice I'd swallowed, the pay freezes I endorsed, the vacation days I let expire, the overtime I ate so my crew could clock out to see their kids' school plays. $3,100? It was less than the cost of safety gloves for 1 quarter. Yet it wrote my obituary. Beyond the screen. On the corkboard I'd pinned beside the routing map. My old yellow post-it still read, "Measure twice, ship once." Someone had tried to peel it off, leaving a torn corner, symbolic, sloppy. Beneath it, a brand new poster chirped, "Move fast, break stuff" in neon bubble letters. I almost laughed. In logistics, breaking stuff means spoiled food, ruptured contracts, shattered trust. I remembered drilling that lesson into fresh grads, maybe even into Evan, while he doodled hashtags instead of notes. I felt the room tilt, but anger, not gravity, spun the floor. Evan and Tori were photographing their lunch salads beside a crate marked Hazmat, dry ice. They didn't notice my fists curl. "Be sure to log out when you're done," Tori sang, never lifting her gaze. I breathed through my nose, saved the incriminating message to the drive, and ejected it like a detonator, gathering my box. I looked at their bright sneakers tapping my scuffed anti-fatigue mat. They were oblivious. But I was awake, sharper than a box cutter against shrink wrap. At the door, I paused, letting the insult sear into memory, branding every nerve with purpose. My voice came out steady, almost gentle. "Good luck," I said, because luck was the only tool they packed. Down the hallway. Forklift beepers returned like a heartbeat. I clutched the flash drive, feeling its weight multiply for all of them. But what if cheap ends up costly? The hallway outside the ops center echoed with fluorescent silence as I walked toward the service elevator, my box in hand. My shoulders set. Every step down that corridor was like turning a page I hadn't finished reading. By the time the elevator doors slid shut behind me, I could barely breathe. I leaned against the cold steel wall, letting the hum of machinery vibrate into my spine. It was a sound I'd come to know better than my own heartbeat. 21 winters. That's how long I'd kept the veins of this company warm. 21 years of freezing docks, short-staffed shifts, and 3 a.m. breakdown calls. When our first routing software crashed in 2009, I stayed 48 hours straight to realign shipments by hand. When the union walked out in 2013, I stepped into steel-toe boots and unloaded trucks alongside the interns. And in 2020, when COVID locked down 3 cities in 1 week, I rewrote entire distribution protocols over a single sleepless weekend, just so our medical suppliers could move PPE where it mattered most. I missed birthdays. I missed anniversaries. I buried my husband with one hand and wrote recovery schedules with the other. Back then, we didn't have Phoenix. All we had was instinct, caffeine, and the drive not to let things fall apart. Phoenix came later, an experimental system I coded in my garage during the holiday lull of 2017. It was supposed to be temporary, just a little algorithm to help flag route bottlenecks before they happened. I never meant for it to become permanent, but it worked. Too well. By 2019, every branch had adopted Phoenix. By 2021, the company claimed it as proprietary IP, even though they never changed a line of code. They praised its predictive efficiency in board meetings. The young ones called it our secret AI weapon. They didn't know it was built on my sleepless nights and quiet resentments, held together with logic and the memories of where systems used to break. I kept the admin key, not out of pride, but out of caution. I knew what happened when systems outgrew their makers. The deadliest failures are the ones that happen after the architect walks away. I thought of that as the elevator dinged at the ground floor, and I stepped into the January wind that slapped like shame. I glanced back once, up toward the frosted windows of the office, where two kids now sat making TikToks beside the emergency freight log I hand-drafted during Hurricane Isaiah. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But there was something heavier than rage building in my chest, the pain of being forgotten in a house I'd built. I drove home without turning on the radio. The snow picked up along Route 12, flakes spinning like static, somewhere between mile marker 17 and my exit. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn update. Tori had already changed her job title. Senior Logistics Lead. Effective immediately. No mention of me, no handoff, no legacy. Just a clean overwrite. That night, I pulled out the black binder, where I kept Phoenix's earliest drafts, handwritten sketches, flowcharts drawn with a red Sharpie, error logs from the beta days, and at the bottom, my name on the original patent application, filed but never submitted. My fingers hovered over the binder's edge. I should have let it go, should have walked away, but history deserves better than a delete key. I whispered it into the silence of my living room, like a vow etched in frost. I built the bones of this place. They just painted over the skin. I didn't cry on the drive home. I didn't turn on music either. The world outside my windshield blurred into slushy gray. But inside my car, everything felt muted, like I was sitting behind soundproof glass while life kept talking on the other side. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the streetlights were flickering on. 6:22 p.m. The porch light I'd set on a timer blinked to life as if to say, "Welcome back, forgotten warrior." I parked, carried the cardboard box inside, and set it on the kitchen table like it might still explode. I didn't take off my coat. I went straight to the den. The desktop sat exactly as I'd left it. Screens dark, cables coiled, keyboard smudged with old coffee fingerprints. This wasn't the company's equipment. This was mine. The original command center from which I'd built Phoenix 5 years ago when management refused to invest in a monitoring system for branch-level routing. Back then, Phoenix was just a name I scribbled in the margin of a notepad during an especially boring finance meeting. I imagined something that could self-learn from routing errors, flag inefficient loops, and build performance scores silently in the background. No applause required, no dashboard, no flair, just a watcher in the shadows. I sat down and powered it on. The hum of the CPU was soft, almost reassuring, like an old dog that had been waiting faithfully at the door. The login screen blinked to life. I typed admin A and entered the passphrase only I knew, the name of my late husband's favorite jazz song. Phoenix opened instantly, still operational, still loyal. I scrolled through the performance monitor. The system had already flagged 3 high-risk overrides made by Evan that day. 2 shipments rerouted manually without confirmation. 1 safety protocol ignored. Phoenix hadn't acted on it. Not yet. It was still watching, waiting. I clicked into the failsafe module. Heart rate steady. This was the part no one else knew existed. Not even IT. I'd embedded a protocol into Phoenix called Failsafe 0, nicknamed the Dead Man Switch. It was simple. If I didn't log into the system within a set window of 72 hours, Phoenix would assume I'd been removed. And when that happened, it would unseal everything. All the performance reports, all the hidden audit trails, all the Slack screenshots Phoenix had quietly archived through passive log scraping. The recipients? Not just the company's board and compliance team. That would be predictable. No, Phoenix was smarter than that. One of its program directives was to forward critical integrity breaches directly to our top 3 clients' internal compliance divisions, including the Department of Veterans Logistics, whose distribution we'd handled since 2004. They had no idea Phoenix had that link. They had no idea I had written it in. I adjusted the setting to count 72 hours from 7 o'clock p.m. tonight, No need to get poetic about the timing, just enough to give them a chance to prove me wrong. Then I stood up and walked back to the kitchen. I reheated a container of leftover soup. I turned on the news, but muted the sound. I didn't need to hear what the world was saying. I already knew how quickly things unravel when the wrong people hold the thread. After dinner, I took a shower, folded some laundry, let the cat in, watered the spider plant that hadn't bloomed in 2 years. Then I sat back in my chair, turned off the monitor, and whispered, "Sleep well, Phoenix." I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumphant. Just a strange stillness, like being the last person awake in a house that used to be full. If they thought I'd just disappear, they'd forgotten who wrote the rules of this game. If they forgot who built it, maybe they deserved to meet the truth behind it. Morning broke with the thin, brittle light unique to late January. But my kitchen felt warmer than usual, maybe because I finally understood the temperature of indifference. I brewed coffee at 6:15 a.m. Classic dark roast, no sugar, extra spite. Outside, fresh snow crusted the driveway. Inside, Phoenix's dashboard blinked teal in the den, a silent heartbeat under the house. I wasn't hovering, I told myself, merely confirming that yesterday's countdown still ticked. 64 hours and change. The interface glowed steady, content to keep score. I sipped and imagined Evan clocking in, hair still damp from whatever cocktail bar he'd closed at 1 o'clock a.m. Swaggering toward the terminal I once guarded like a vault. At 7:30 a.m., the first alert appeared, orange, not red. Manual route override pending. I leaned back, letting the bitter coffee coat my tongue. My replacement thought he could improve on algorithms tested during 15 winters. 1 pandemic, and a hurricane the Weather Channel christened Isaiah. How adorable. By 8:08 a.m., Evan finalized his brainstorm. Divert our frozen meal shipment, which should have traveled north along I-55, to a consolidation center in Mobile, Alabama. His reasoning, scrawled in the comments section. Read, warmer climate means faster defrost for end prep. I snorted hard enough to fog the monitor. Defrost? These pallets weren't artisan sorbet. They were protein packs for the Midwestern Veterans Nutrition Program. Warmth was the enemy. Phoenix asked him twice to confirm temperature-sensitive cargo risk. He clicked yes both times. It was like watching someone light matches in a fireworks tent and congratulate themselves on innovation. The orange alert turned crimson at 9:21 a.m. Route conflict, cryogenic threshold breach likely? I placed my mug down, slow and controlled, because fury likes sudden movement, and I wasn't giving it that satisfaction. Instead, I opened a weather tab. Mobile's forecast showed 73 degrees by noon. Perfect for beaches, lethal for dry ice. Around 11:40 a.m., a logistics assistant, poor kid barely 22, called my cell by mistake, thinking I still ran cold chain ops. His voice trembled. Ma'am, sensors show rising temps in container VC-117, but Evan says keep rolling. I told him policies required escalation to management. Knowing full well, management was busy hashtagging hustle culture on LinkedIn. By 1:10 p.m., Phoenix recorded a material breach. Core temperature climbed above 40 degrees. Dry ice exhausted. The system stamped a giant scarlet F across the shipment file. And, per protocol, I wrote back in 2019. Synced the failure report to the Department of Veterans Logistics dashboard. The integration had been my concession prize after finance vetoed backup generators. Nobody upstairs remembered it existed. They would remember now. The client portal time-stamped the anomaly, triggering a compliance countdown and an automatic inquiry email to every executive with a 6-figure title. Worse, it pinged the state inspector whose brother ate lunches there. Exactly 10 minutes later. My phone pinged with a group chat screenshot. Evan and Tori arguing over who misread the manifest, while a regional manager barked in all caps. Frozen chicken, mashed sweet potatoes, and spinach soufflé, 3 days' meals for 886 veterans, were spoiling in a humid Gulf warehouse. Insurance might cover product loss, but not dignity. I stood in the doorway, watching snow slip from the roof in white sheets, and felt a sharp, almost pleasant slice of irony. Evan had tried to bring heat to logistics. Heat had answered, somewhere downtown. Sheila was probably drafting a learning opportunity memo. Meanwhile, Phoenix silently archived every keystroke, every panicked Slack emoji, every admission of cluelessness. Did I feel vindicated? Not exactly. Vindication tastes sweet. This tasted like metal, like biting a coin to test if it's real. Years of warnings dismissed as paranoia were crystallizing into proof. And proof is cold. Still, I felt the anger under the ice, a slow black current. They'd gambled $3,100 and already torched triple that in protein and freight fees before lunch, and the true bill hadn't even arrived. I closed the den door, shutting in the hum of circuitry, and breathed through my nose until the sting retreated. My hands never touched their system today, yet damage radiated outward like a cracked windshield. I didn't touch a thing. Phoenix saw it all. I slept poorly, but not from guilt. By 7:58 a.m. the next morning, snow was swirling sideways across the picture window like static on an old television. I watched the flakes thicken, sipped burnt coffee, and let the silence press against my ribs. Yesterday's spoiled veterans' meals had already made local radio. The announcer called it a minor mishap. Minor, I thought, while 886 men and women scraped trays half empty. Day 2 dawned. Snow erased the horizon. Phoenix pulsed in the den, its countdown at 40 hours. I refused to hover, still. The screen's faint glow leaked under the door. Impossible to ignore. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying that low, hollow roar Midwesterners recognize in their bones, a blizzard barreling south faster than trucks can outrun it. At 9:27 a.m., Phoenix blipped orange again. Evan was overriding recommended storm diversions on every northbound lane. 37 rigs loaded with medical supplies, winter produce, and lithium batteries. The system warned weather obstruction imminent. He clicked proceed as though the message were a pop-up ad. Tori backed him up with a thumbs-up emoji in the comment field. I breathed in through my nose, out through my teeth, slow enough to keep the glass calm in my hand. The margin between fury and focus is razor thin. I balanced on it like a blade walker. By 10:06 a.m., the National Weather Service upgraded the alert. Whiteout conditions. Wind gusts above 50 miles per hour. Road closures from Des Moines to Duluth. Phoenix flashed red. Evan's response in the log. Keep momentum, delays kill margins. Margins. I whispered the word, to feel how small it sounded against the roar outside. I answered a knock from the mail carrier, signed for a package, and caught the reflection of my own face in the storm door. Eyes flat, mouth set. A veteran might call it the 1,000-yard stare. I just called it Tuesday. Phone buzzed. Text from Caleb, the junior dispatcher who'd phoned me yesterday by accident. Caleb. Please, do you still have the 2016 snow protocol? Evan says not needed, but roads closing fast. The words flickered on the screen like a lifeline thrown into dark water. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. The 2016 protocol was 12 pages of contingencies I'd written after back-to-back tempests stranded drivers for 36 hours. Legal had filed it under critical infrastructure. Management had filed it under ancient history. I typed, deleted, retyped. Finally I sent, you should escalate to management. Nothing more. My pulse thudded. but my face never moved. At 10:11 p.m., the first rig jackknifed outside Mason City. Dashcam video uploaded automatically to Phoenix. The driver's voice cracked over CB. White out, lost the lane, someone tell dispatch. 10 minutes later, 2 more rigs slid into median drifts. Traffic cam feeds spilled into Phoenix's incident module like dominoes tipping. Evan, ever resourceful, opened a new Slack channel titled Wah, Snow Who? He joked about boomer drama queens and posted a gif of Elsa singing Let It Go. Phoenix scraped the gif, tagged it unprofessional content, and stored the evidence in a folder named Escalate L2. I imagined the time-stamped laugh echoing during the inevitable investigation. At 3:23 p.m., the Department of Veterans Logistics portal pinged an alert to executive inboxes. Vital diabetes medication shipment delayed indefinite. Contingency pickups unavailable. Somewhere. A compliance officer's eyebrow arched. The snow kept falling. My house grew quieter. I set the phone face down, walked to the den, and watched Phoenix project glowing red arteries across the Midwest. Routes clogging. Deadlines bleeding out. I touched nothing. My hands stayed behind my back. Fingers laced so tightly, the knuckles lost color. Caleb texted once more. Management says protocol missing. They think you took it. Any advice? I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Advice? They'd torn my name off the manual and called it obsolete. They could own the consequences. 2. I returned to the window. The neighborhood looked blank, erased, inside. Something colder than the storm settled behind my sternum. Heavy but controlled. Like packed snow, you can carve into a blade. I let the silence stretch, then whispered into it. More statement than promise. I drafted that plan, but they shredded it with my name. The storm still raged at 7:09 a.m., burying street signs to their necks while Phoenix glowed blood red in the den. 40 minutes earlier, 3 more rigs had spun into ditches outside Eau Claire, and Evan had posted a selfie captioned, "Snow ain't real if you manifest summer," a sentiment currently circulating through the internal compliance server farm all before lunch. I carried my phone to the kitchen for a second mug of coffee. Before the steam faded, the screen lit up. Sheila Marks, incoming call. I let it ring twice, then answered, voice flat, as the iced-over lake beyond the window. Allie, thank God! Are you somewhere you can talk? She sounded frayed. I can listen. We've got a Category 3 logistics failure. Routes closed. Drivers stranded. The client threatening breach. Evan can't locate the severe weather files. It says they lived in your directory. Could you forward them? We'll compensate you, of course. Compensate. A nickel tossed at a broken jukebox. Which file? The 2016 Snow Protocol, she blurted. If we don't stabilize shipments by 1:40 p.m., penalties will be catastrophic. Name your fee, consultant rate, retro bonus, whatever. I set the spoon down, metal kissing glass. I wrote that manual on a folding table beside dispatch. 72 hours, 3 drafts, no overtime. Yes? Well, hindsight is 20/20. Funny, I murmured. So is foresight, if you read the memos. She inhaled sharply. Allie, please, the drivers are freezing. I warned the board last quarter that winter prep was underfunded. They cut it to buy espresso makers for the wellness lounge. My voice stayed velvet over wire. Tell me, Sheila, would you call me if I cost more than your coffee budget? Silence. I pictured her pinching the bridge of her nose, calculating dignity versus disaster. This isn't the time for grudges, she managed. Agreed. It's the time for leadership. Good luck. I ended the call, laid the phone face down, and let breath hiss through clenched teeth until the window stopped fogging. The kitchen grew so still I heard snow ticks on glass. Controlled anger contracts, crystallizes, sharper than any blade. I carried that blade to the den. Phoenix had already bundled the latest rec reports into a PDF titled Night Movement Failures. Distribution countdown, 4 hours. In the chat log, Evan's selfie sat beside a thermometer burst emoji Phoenix had appended for future auditors. I thought of spoiled veterans' meals, stranded drivers, children playing with matches. The cursor hovered over the override that could delay Phoenix's release. My finger never pressed. Instead, I wrote a single-line email to Caleb, the only junior who still said ma'am. Document resides in folder legacy SOPs. Access is board restricted. Information, not salvation. He could choose his road. Outside, a plow heaved a snow wall across my driveway. The world was splitting into two camps, those who respect foundations and those who decorate facades. Ice crackled on the power lines. I felt no urge to stand in the middle anymore. The phone buzzed again. Sheila's text. A final plea wrapped in 3 exclamation marks. I deleted it unopened. Some lessons arrive by presence. Others, by absence. Phoenix's timer read 36 hours. Plenty of room for consequences to mature. I gave them silence. But silence was already armed. When the call logs finally went silent, the house settled into a hush so thick it felt engineered. I stared at the den door, unwilling to open it again, yet unable to leave it closed. Phoenix's countdown beacon had seeped under the frame all night, a faint blue pulse mapping itself across the hardwood like a second-hand heartbeat. According to the system clock, still pegged to Eastern Time for legacy reasons, 71 hours had elapsed since my last login. That left 59 minutes and 59 seconds before the failsafe detonated. Normally, I live by checklists: fuel the generator, charge every device, back up files twice. But a storm-soaked blackout at 2:46 a.m. had knocked the grid and fried my surge protectors. When power snapped back an hour later, I found the laptop clinging to 3% battery, screen dim, fan wheezing. The charger brick smelled scorched. One more spike, and the machine, my only local gateway to Phoenix, would be toast. I cradled it like an injured bird and eased into the bay window seat, snow piling in drifts beneath the glass. Wind keened through the gutters, rattling rafters in counterpoint to Phoenix's silent metronome. I could almost hear my late husband's baritone threading through the storm. Your mind is your fire alarm. Allie, wire it before they burn you. He'd said it after a smaller betrayal, when I'd fought for safety upgrades and been told they were non-essential. That night, we drank cheap bourbon and plotted contingencies that now pulsed beneath my fingertips. For a breathless moment, I weighed options. Salvage a charger from the basement workshop, dash through the storm for a gas station adapter, or simply trust the code I'd written when my eyesight was sharper than today. The first two were reckless gestures. The third demanded faith sharper than fear alone. 43 minutes remained. I opened the laptop, panel flickering like a bad fluorescent. Battery icon, 2%. Any login might drain the last crumbs of power. And without an adapter, I couldn't risk a reboot. My heartbeat thudded so loudly, I almost missed the phone vibrating on the sill. Caleb again. Board meets in 15. They can't trace half the rigs. Evan says Phoenix is glitching. Glitching? Phoenix wasn't glitching. It was gathering. Every missed delivery, every snide emoji, every compliance ping was fusing into a dossier sharper than knives. 35 minutes. I flipped the laptop over, yanked the dying battery, and set it on the carpet to cool. An involuntary last rite. If Phoenix had died with the hardware, the entire plan would crater. The board would scapegoat a middle manager and bury lessons under NDAs. I flexed cold fingers, tension coiling tight as wire. 22 minutes. Lightning flashed, white, then violet, followed by a boom that shook snow from the roof. The room went black, power gone again. My pulse lurched, but training kicked in. I counted to 10, exhaled, and felt for the solar pack I kept under the sofa. The pack held a single LED and half a charge, enough to see. Not to revive silicon. 15 minutes. I slid to the den and opened the door. The tower housing Phoenix's original kernel sat dark. Yet beneath the casing, a faint green diode blinked, my own stubborn Morse code. 6 months ago, anticipating storms. I'd migrated the core to a remote VPS mirrored on this node. Even if every wire in this house melted, Phoenix would still run, far above the clouds, on somebody else's diesel. 10 minutes. In total darkness, I sat cross-legged, listening to the diode flash, each pulse steady as breathwork. Whatever panic clawed my chest shrank beneath discipline. The failsafe didn't need the laptop. It didn't need me at all. I had already wired the alarm. 3 minutes. Somewhere downtown. Executives scrambled for alibis, drafting statements about unforeseeable conditions in 11 more lines of code. Those excuses would meet the evidence. Outside, sirens wailed distant, swallowed by the blizzard's white noise. Snow hissed against siding like static on vinyl. I pressed my palm to the server case. Cold metal calming nerves the way rosary beads steady faith. Second hand at hour 71, minute 59, second 59. I closed my eyes. All I had to do was nothing. The green diode blinked once, twice, then settled into a steady cadence exactly at 8 o'clock a.m. The instant Phoenix's failsafe finished its 72-hour interrogation. Nothing exploded. No sirens screamed. In fact, the room felt almost peaceful, like early communion. I exhaled into the darkness, waited for the power to groan back through the neighborhood transformer, and padded to the kitchen. By the time the lights flickered on, kettle water was already rolling. Steam clouded the frosty window pane while I watched the street buried knee-deep in alabaster drift. Somewhere under that muffled horizon, dozens of tractor trailers sat immobile, each one a monument to someone else's arrogance. Phoenix needed less than 60 seconds to perform its purpose. 20 data bundles shot from the remote server to inboxes labeled board, legal, compliance, and, most critically, client gov vets. Each bundle carried a color-coded grade sheet. Evan Lewis. Overall score 34%. Tori Kim, 31%. Listed beneath were 7 Level 1 failures. Temperature violation, hazardous reroute, falsified log note, unapproved manual override, harassment GIF, safety neglect, and non-compliance with weather protocol. Each failure linked to time-stamped evidence, screenshots, sensor logs, and Slack transcripts. The audit algorithm also calculated a projected liability curve. Every quarter hour of unaddressed negligence would inflate penalty exposure by $12,000, compounding like frost on untreated steel. Phoenix did not editorialize. It simply delivered truth at broadband speed. I poured Darjeeling into the chipped mug my husband once called the victory cup. The aroma unfurled like cedar and smoke, filling corners the blizzard could not reach. I had imagined this moment for months, yet when it arrived, the dominant sensation was not triumph. It was deep, velvety quiet, an inner hush where satisfaction hummed softly but unmistakably. A ping drifted from my phone, then another, then a torrent. Power restored cellular towers, and the world found its voice. I carried the mug to the living room sofa and opened the first message. A forwarded alert from the Department of Veterans Logistics. Emergency contract suspension, effective immediately. Root cause investigation demanded. The second email came from the company's own general counsel. Subject line in all capitals. Critical breach. Stop all operations until further notice. I sipped. The tea was too hot, but that seemed fitting. Refresh. More arrivals piled in. A media relations draft asking whether the term isolated clerical oversight could placate federal investigators. An internal memo from finance estimating preliminary losses at $5.7 million. A frantic text from Sheila. Allie, PLZ call ASAP. We need context. Context, I thought, is expensive. The most interesting notification, however, came from our biggest produce distributor, Heartland Farm Co-op. They had copied every executive on a short, lethal statement. All purchase orders frozen pending third-party audit. Your Phoenix report indicates systematic negligence involving human override. Provide full documentation within 24 hours or face permanent termination of supplier status. That was the domino I had counted on. Heartland supplied nearly 40% of the warehouse's winter volume. Losing them would carve marrow from the balance sheet. Federal contracts hate blood on ledgers. One suspension leads to another. And suddenly, a savings of $3,100 becomes an anchor dragging the vessel under. Outside, sirens wailed faintly. The county plow escorting rescue crews toward the interstate pileup Evan's brilliance had helped create. I lifted the mug in a quiet toast, not to their pain, but to inevitability. The universe may ignore warnings, but it never waives fees. Another ping. Caleb again. His message a single shocked sentence. They're blaming you for withholding protocols. I typed a calm reply. Documentation was available to anyone who valued it. I did not press send. Some seeds sprout better in silence. I deleted the draft and powered the phone down. In the den, Phoenix transitioned from release mode to observe. A new folder opened itself, ready to archive the fallout in real time. I closed the door, letting blue light streak the hallway like a night watch lantern. Back in the kitchen, the tea had cooled to perfect temperature. I drank slowly, feeling heat ripple from tongue to ribs, while inboxes across the Midwest detonated with revelations. Outside, the wind howled like distant applause for a reckoning. The emails came in, faster than I could sip my tea. By 8:30 a.m., the storm had calmed, but inside the company, the damage was just beginning to swirl. I was finishing the last of my tea when the local financial news anchor's voice pierced the airwaves like a siren. Breaking, equity in Hallwell Logistics dropped 22% in pre-market trading after leaked internal reports exposed widespread operational misconduct and human override errors. The source appears to be an internal system called Phoenix. I sat motionless. Not from shock. This moment was inevitable, but from the raw collision of feelings crashing inside me. Vindication, rage, grief, power. For 21 years. I had eaten in silence, stayed late without complaint, absorbed every microaggression like insulation. But now my silence had teeth, and it bit hard. The segment cut to a screenshot of an internal compliance email stamped urgent in red, with my name on it. They weren't blaming me, at least not fully, but I was in the crosshairs. My fingertips tingled. I could hear my husband again. You gave them structure, but they won't notice the scaffolding until it collapses. At 9:00 a.m., a headline lit up my phone. Senior staff axed. Data proves catastrophic mistake. The story had already spread across LinkedIn, Reddit, and half a dozen logistics newsletters. The comments were savage. This is what happens when you fire the brains to hire buzzwords. You don't replace 20 years of experience with TikTok slideshows. Evan's LinkedIn page was flooded with laughing emojis. Tori's last post had been quietly deleted. Then came the push notification. CEO Mark Havelock calls emergency press conference. I turned up the volume. The feed opened to a hastily arranged podium in front of company headquarters. Havelock, flanked by two grim-faced executives, stepped forward with the stiff posture of a man walking a plank. His voice cracked under the first sentence. We regret the recent operational oversights. Measures are being taken to review personnel decisions. A reporter cut in, her voice sharp. Why were warnings from Phoenix ignored? Who disabled internal safety alerts? And why was the only architect of the system terminated 3 days before the breach? Mark flinched, mumbled something about complexities in workforce optimization, then looked off camera. A handler leaned in, whispered. The feed ended abruptly. I sat back on the couch, breath held for the first time all morning. The blood in my ears roared. It was more than a newsflash. It was an aftershock, knocking loose emotions I hadn't given myself permission to feel. Betrayal, pride, disbelief, and beneath it all, a strange, rising joy that made my eyes sting. Then came the email. Subject: Strategic Opportunity. Inquiry from Ascend Path Technologies. I blinked. I didn't know them, not directly, but I knew their reputation. A rising logistics tech startup known for poaching top minds, building lean systems, and respecting legacy experience as fuel, not clutter. The message was short, respectful, and pointed. Ms. Robinson, we've followed the Hallwell situation closely. Your creation of Phoenix and the integrity you maintained have impressed our leadership. We're in need of a strategic systems consultant as we scale globally. Would you be open to a conversation? A. Lynn, CTO, Ascend Path Technologies. I stared at the screen, pulse steady now, like the eye of the storm had finally arrived. Could I go back? Start again? Build something new? With people who actually listened? Who knew what scaffolding was worth before the ceiling collapsed? Outside, the snow had begun to melt. The roads were clearing. I heard a truck reversing down the street, steady beeps against thawing air. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was what I'd waited for all along. They asked if I wanted to build something again. I just might. By 9:30 a.m., Hallwell Logistics was bleeding from every orifice, stock plummeting, contracts frozen, headlines multiplying like bacteria in a petri dish. I wasn't watching the chaos unfold anymore. I was watching it echo. I sat in my sunroom, morning light spilling over the table where Phoenix had once been conceived on napkin sketches and caffeine highs. I was folding laundry, ordinary, quiet, when the phone rang. Sheila. I let it buzz once, twice, then answered, slow and even. Allie. Her voice cracked before the first word fully landed. Allie, thank God you picked up. Silence filled the next beat. I didn't rush to fill it. She took a ragged breath. The board is in full meltdown. Legal wants to open audits. Half our fleet's grounded. Clients are threatening permanent exits if we can't show a plan within 24 hours. She paused, then added with forced calm. They've agreed to bring you back. Not just bring you back, on your terms. I leaned back in the chair. Go on. You'd be rehired immediately as Strategic Operations Officer. Triple salary, a 7% equity package, and full, uncontested access to Phoenix. All of it. No more back doors. No limits. I didn't speak. I let her list the offer like a grocery receipt read aloud in a trembling voice. She continued, desperation rising. They're even willing to backdate the agreement. Acknowledge the system was your intellectual property. This could repair everything. Allie, we need you. We, not long ago. I was disposable, replaced by 2 Gen Z hires to save $3,100. Now I was suddenly we. I stood, walked slowly to the window, and watched a pair of children drag sleds through the melting snowbanks. A hawk circled above the quiet street, indifferent and sovereign. I imagined stepping back into that building, this time flanked by lawyers and legacy, returning not as a worker, but as a force. It would be so easy. Too easy. I returned to the phone. I appreciate the offer. A pause, then relief in her voice. You'll do it? No, I said softly. But I'll send you a name. Someone younger, sharper, ready. I'll even help train them. If you can promise you'll listen this time. Silence again. Sheila whispered, "Why not take it yourself?" I smiled. Not cruel, just certain. Because I no longer work. Another pause. I architect systems for the future. I ended the call before she could reply. It didn't need a response. Some moments deserve to close with finality. I walked back to the den, reopened the email from Ascend Path Technologies, the startup that had reached out the day before. The subject line was now updated, formal offer enclosed. They didn't want me to clean up a mess. They wanted me to design something clean from the start, something built with dignity at the foundation. The offer came with decision-making autonomy, team selection privileges, and a signing bonus larger than what Halwell had ever paid me in a full year. But it wasn't the money that swayed me. It was the tone. It was respect. Unconditional and overdue. Outside, the storm had fully passed. The streets were clear. The sky burnished steel blue. A few early robins chirped along the gutters, as if testing the air for spring. I typed a single-line response to Ascend's offer. "Let's build." Then I rose, brewed fresh tea, and carried it to the back deck. Phoenix would continue running in the background, logging data, preserving truth, not for revenge, but for memory. Somewhere in a sterile boardroom, Sheila was relaying my rejection. Maybe someone slammed a folder. Maybe the CEO buried his face in his hands. But none of that mattered. They thought they could buy silence with savings. I gave them the cost of arrogance. Saturday sunlight spilled across Mom's old oak breakfast table, while my younger sister, Mara, flipped through the business section, crumbs of sourdough catching the headlines. I buttered toast with deliberate slowness, savoring the ordinary hush that settles after storms. Outside, meltwater dripped from icicles like a ticking clock, no longer set to anyone else's schedule. Mara cleared her throat and tapped the front page. "Listen to this," she read, voice half incredulous, half delighted. $3,100 saved, $7 million lost. Is age really just a number? She lowered the paper, eyes shining. Guess the world finally learned cheap can be catastrophic. I sipped peppermint tea from the victory mug. Numbers never lie, I said. Feeling a gentle warmth spread deeper than caffeine. The article detailed the overnight plunge of Halwell Logistics stock, the federal investigation, and Mark Havelock's resignation, effective 9:30 a.m. Every paragraph named Phoenix as the silent witness that refused to be silenced. A breeze carried the smell of cedar from the backyard. Peace settled over my shoulders, not the hollow quiet of defeat, but the solid stillness of completion. For decades, my value had been quantified by savings margins. Now the ledger showed a different balance. I opened my laptop and clicked a private repository labeled legacyfirealarm.zip. Mara raised an eyebrow. More dominoes? Just finishing the row, I answered. With 2 lines of code, I pushed Phoenix's original source to a public domain server. Permanent and irrevocable. The release notes were short. For every elder they underestimated. In minutes, developers worldwide would mirror it, improve it, and remember who designed the scaffolding. Knowledge, once caged, was flying free. Phone vibrations skittered across the tabletop, journalists requesting comment, professors asking for guest lectures, Ascend Path confirming Monday's orientation. I muted the device. Today belonged to quiet victories, hot bread, family laughter, and syllables finely pronounced with respect. Mara poured more tea. "You really turned down triple salary?" "Money's a marker," I shrugged. "Meaning is the currency." She laughed. "Wish Dad could see this. He would tell us to plant something new." I glanced through the patio door, where thin green shoots pierced melting snow. Bulbs he'd planted 15 winters ago, trusting they'd rise when the frost retreated. Yesterday, fear froze possibilities. Today, sunlight coaxed them upward. We ate in companionable silence until only crusts remained. My mind roamed gentle corridors. The first night shift I supervised. The hurricane reroutes. The funeral I half missed to keep perishable loads moving. All those unseen labors had been seeds. Now the roots were showing. I stood, rinsed plates, and wiped the counter. Mara unfolded her phone to capture a photo. "For the scrapbook," she said. I smiled. Not posing, just being. Satisfaction, when real. Photobombs every frame. Before noon, I drafted a final note to Hallwell's remaining drivers. Those who had texted thanks after the report. Hold your line, keep your logs true. And remember, experience isn't overhead. It's ballast. I attached a public link to Phoenix's code and pressed send. Then I stepped onto the porch. The air carried that electric hush unique to mornings when crisis has emptied its lungs. I breathed in 1, 2, 3, feeling ribs widen with possibility. They called it cost saving. I called it a receipt for disrespect, and I printed it in full color. Back inside. I folded the newspaper along the crease, slid it into a binder marked Reminders, and tucked the binder onto the shelf beside my husband's record collection. The needle was already poised above his favorite jazz album, Take 5. I set it spinning. The saxophone's lazy loop floated through the kitchen, mingling with sunlight and yeast, sealing the morning like lacquer. Every note felt like a signature affirming that endings, handled with purpose, can sound a lot like openings, new journeys. Inspired by Allie's quiet triumph? Smash that like button. Share this story with a friend who knows their worth. And drop a comment telling us about a time experience trumped shortcuts. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next tale of hidden power finally unleashed. Together, we'll prove respect is never out of budget. See you in the next video.